Hello, welcome to Mary's Economics. I'm going to do a series of 3 videos looking in more detail at housing. So the high cost of housing in the private rented sector in the UK is a massive driver of poverty, leaving a lot of people desperately struggling. So I'm going to do 3 videos looking in more detail at that. This first video is about local housing allowance. So it's about, the limits on how much help someone can get towards their rent in the private sector if they're on benefits. And then I'm going to do a video about the bedroom tax, which further limits how much help people can get. And then I'm going to do a third video looking at who has actually benefited from this situation. And as with so many things that I talk about on this channel, rich people have been able to get richer as a result of poor people suffering and struggling. So this first video, as I say, is about local housing allowance. So it used to be the case in the UK that, in the 70s, 80s and the first half of the 90s, you could rent a home from a private landlord, and if you were reliant on benefits, you would just tell the local authority how much your rent was and they would send you a cheque every month for that amount, as long as they didn't think that it was too high, as long as they thought that what you were asking for was reasonable for your needs and not too out of step with general rents in the local area. So what you had was some discretion on the part of the local council, and in most cases there was no problem just getting the whole amount of rent paid. That changed in 1996 when the first kind of limit came in. I'm not going to talk too much about that because it's historical. That's not the situation we're in now. But why 1996? Okay, so in 1988, the UK government deregulated private sector rents. Okay, so in the social rented sector, if you're renting a council house or a house from a housing association, then your landlord is regulated by the government and there's a limit on how much rent they can charge you. In 1988, they removed any such limits in the private sector. So by 1996, only 8 years after deregulation, the government was finding the housing benefit bill had gone up massively. Gosh, who would have guessed that that might happen? You let landlords charge whatever they want, and what happens is over a period of some 10 years, private sector rents double in real terms. Okay, so I did see one data source saying that the housing benefit bill over that period leapt from just over 3 billion to over 12 billion, even though the number of people claiming housing benefit went down from 7 million to 5.5. So what did the government do? Did they go back to landlords and say, we've changed our minds, we're not just going to let you charge poor people whatever you like? No, they said, we're going to start limiting how much help we give poor people. So 1996 was when people started to notice that they were no longer getting the full amount to cover their rent. But 2008 is when things really changed. And that's what I'm focusing on now. Local housing allowance was brought in, and we still have local housing allowance. What LHA does is it sets a limit on the amount of help you can get towards your rent according to how many bedrooms there are in the property. Okay, so there is a LHA rate for a room in a shared house, and a slightly higher rate for a 1-bedroom home, and a slightly higher rate for a 2-bedroom home, and so on. And it varies according to locality because it is based on rents in the local area. I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in a moment. So you can go online and look up local housing allowance rates for your area and see how much help you can get towards your rent in respect of homes with a different number of bedrooms. Now, In the bedroom tax video that I'll do next, I will explain how a determination is made about how many bedrooms you need, and that actually says how much LHA you get. For now, I'm just going to focus on the fact that LHA doesn't actually match up with rents, which means that even if everybody agrees that you are entitled to a 3-bedroom home, you'll get the LHA rate for a 3-bedroom home, but you're very unlikely to be able to actually afford a 3-bedroom home. So in 2008, the way they did it was they set LHA rates at the 50th percentile out of the local market rates. So I'm going to explain that by asking you to imagine that there are 100 homes for rent in the private sector with 2 bedrooms. So they would kind of categorize them all by how expensive they were, from the cheapest to the most expensive, and they would take the midpoint. They would take the 50th house, and that is where LHA for a 2-bedroom home would be set. And what that meant was, in theory, if you were claiming benefits to pay your rent, half of the local private rental market would be available to you. In 2011, they changed that, and they set the LHA not at the 50th percentile of local market rates, but at the 30th, okay? So, you know, back to the example of 100 homes that meet your requirements, now you're going to be able to afford 30 out of the 100, but nobody's checking to see if there are enough anyway. So like maybe everyone in the local area who's claiming benefits and looking for a 2-bedroom home is squabbling over those 30 houses that are available to them in the private market, and maybe there are 200 families in that situation. So what are they going to end up doing? Well, what they're going to end up doing is renting somewhere that isn't covered by LHA, right? So like they're going to end up having to make up the shortfall in rent themselves. And if they end up renting a bigger home than they need, then now they're also going to be subject to the bedroom tax. So the bedroom tax wasn't a thing in 2011, but it is now. So like I say, I'll come on to that in the next video. I just need to say that even though LHA in 2011 was set at such a level that you were supposed to be able to afford 30% of the local private rental market, what then happened was LHA got frozen and private rents didn't, because they haven't been since 1988. So rents got higher and higher. LHA was increasingly not enough. And from time to time, LHA has been rebalanced against the 30th percentile of local market rates, but it soon falls out of step again. Charities and campaigners all over have been complaining for a long time about the broken link between LHA and actual rents, which leaves far too many people who are reliant on benefits to pay their rent desperately struggling, and that is only getting worse. So I will say that, yes, in the social rented sector, if you are in a council home or a housing association property, you won't be in that situation. They are regulated rents and LHA doesn't apply. LHA is about the private rented sector, which is unregulated. However, even in a council property or a housing association property, you will be subject to the bedroom tax, which could reduce the amount of help you get towards your rent. So I'm going to explain about that in the next video. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching.